I'm a good old rebel, now that is what I am. And for this new world order I do not give a damn. I'm glad I fought against it, I only wish we'd won. And I don't want no pardon for anything I've done. I hate the new world order and everything they do. I hate the politicians, United Nations and the EU. I hate the new world order with all their bucks and fuss. The lying, thieving bastards. I hate them worse and worse. Welcome to Speeches That Change the World. Your humble narrator. A passionate attachment of one nation for another produces a variety of evils. George Washington. Farewell Address, 17th September 1796. As the first President of the United States of America, George Washington holds a special place in history. Born the 22nd February 1732, the son of a Virginia planter, he became a soldier and saw early action in the French and Indian War, 1754-1763, the bloodiest American war of the 18th century. The years 1759-75 were more peaceful for Washington, who concentrated on managing his land around Mount Vernon and served in the Virginia House of Burgesses. During this period, he and other landowners felt increasingly exploited and restricted by British regulations, and Washington became vocal in his objections. By the autumn of 1760, the British controlled all of North America frontier, and in 1763, France surrendered all her American possessions to the British and Spain. Conflict between the British and the Native Americans gradually led to a worsening relations between England and her colonies, to the Revolutionary War itself, in which Washington was to play a central role. In 1774 and 1775, Washington took part in two continental congresses held by the American colonies against British rule, and in 1775 became commander of the Continental Army raised by his colonists. In July that year, he began his involvement in the War of Independence, which was to last 6 years. It was under his leadership that America eventually triumphed, notably through the decisive battle at Yorktown in 1781. In 1787, Washington chaired the Philadelphia Convention that drafted the American Constitution, and at the end of April 1789, he was elected president by unanimous vote by the Electoral College, taking his oath of office on the balcony of Federal Hall in New York's Wall Street. He was president for 2 terms. Born 22nd February 1732 in Virginia, the combining and distinguished military career with politics, Washington led American troops to victory against the British in the War of Independence. He chaired the convention and drafted the American Constitution, and was elected first President of the United States, serving for 2 terms. His farewell address emphasized the importance of the Union. Died 14 of December 1799 in Virginia. Washington's birthday is a public holiday in the US, celebrated on the 3rd Monday in February. As President, Washington concerned himself especially with foreign policy. When hostilities between the French and the British flared, he insisted on following a policy of neutrality rather than siding with either, and his powerful farewell address includes a warning against Americans forming long-term alliances. In retirement, he returned to Mount Vernon, where he died in December 1799. He was mourned by the nation for months. Friends and fellow citizens, the period for a new election of a citizen to administer the executive government of the United States. Be not far distant, and the time actually arrived when your thoughts must be employed to designating the person who is to be clothed with that important trust. It appears to me proper, especially as it may conduce to a more distant expression of the public voice, that I should now appraise you for the resolution I have formed to decline being considered among the number of those out of whom a choice is to be made. I have the constellation to believe that, while choice and prudence invite me to quit the political scene, patriotism does not forbid it. A solicitude for your welfare which cannot end but with my life, and the apprehension of death, natural to this solitude, urge me, on an occasion like the present, to offer you to your solemn contemplation, and to recommend to your frequent review some sentiments which are the result of much reflection, of no inconsiderable observation, and which appear to me all important to the permanency of the facility as a people. These will be offered to you with more freedom, as you can only see in them the disinterested warnings of a parting friend, who can possibly have no personal motive to bias his counsel. Nor can I forget, as an encouragement to it, your indulgent reception of my sentiments on a former and not dissimilar occasion. Your union ought to be considered as the main prop of your liberty, and that the love of the one ought to endure to you the preservation of the other, interwoven as is in the love of liberty with every lineament of your hearts. No recommendation of mine is necessary to fortify or confirm the attachment. The unity of government which constitutes you one people is also dear to you. It is justly so, for it is the main pillar in the edifice of your real independence, the support of your tranquillity at home, your peace abroad, of your safety, of your prosperity, of that very liberty which you so highly prize. Citizens by birth or choice of a common country, that country has a right to concentrate your affections. The name of America, which belongs to you in your national capacity, must always exalt the just pride of patriotism more than the expiation derived from the local discriminations, which slight shades of difference. You have the same religion, manners, habits, and political principles. You have in common cause for and triumph together. The independence and liberty you possess are the work of joint councils and joint efforts, of common dangers, suffering, and successes. But these considerations, however powerfully they address themselves to your sensibility, are greatly outweighed by those which apply more immediately to your interest. Here, every portion of our countries finds the most commanding motives of carefully guarding and preserving the union of the whole. Your union ought to be considered as the main prop of your liberty, and the love of one ought to endure to you the preservation of the other. Observe good faith and justice towards all nations. Cultivate peace and harmony with all. Religion and morality enjoin this conduct, and can it be that good policy does not equally enjoin it? It will be worthy of a free and enlightened, and at no distant period a great nation, to give to mankind the magnanimous and to novel example of the people always guided by the exalted justice and benevolence. Who can doubt that in the course of time and things the fruits of such a plan would richly repay any temporary advantages which might be lost by a steady adherence to it? Can it be that Providence has not connected the permanent facility of a nation with its virtue? The experiment, at least, is recommended by every sentiment which ennobles human nature. Alas, is it rendered impossible by its vices? A passionate attachment of one nation for another produces a variety of evils. Sympathy for the favourite nation, facilitating the illusion of an imaginary common interest in cases where no real common interest exists, and infusing into one of the enmities of the other, betrays the former into the participation in the quarrels and wars of the latter without adequate inducement or justification. It leads also to the consciousness to the favourite nation of privileges denied to others, which is apt doubly to ensure the nation making the concessions by unnecessarily parting with what ought to have been retained, and by exciting jealousy, ill will, and disposition to retaliate in the parties from the equal privileges are withheld, and it gives to ambitious, corrupted or deluded citizens who devote themselves to a favourite nation facility to betray or sacrifice the interest of their own country without odium, sometimes even with popularity, gliding with the appearance of virtuous sense of obligation, a common and dull deference for public opinion, or a laudable zeal for public good, the base or foolish compliances of ambition, corruption, and infiltration. Against this insidious wiles of foreign influence, I concur you to believe me, fellow citizens, the jealousy of a free people ought to be constantly awake, since history and experience prove that foreign influence is one of the most baneful foes of republican government. But that jealousy, to be useful, must be impartial, else it becomes the instrument of the very influences to be avoided instead of defence against it. Excessive partiality for one foreign nation and excess dislike for another cause those whom they accuse to see danger only in one side, and serve to veil and even second the arts of influence on the other. Real patriots who may resist the intrigues of the favourite are liable to become suspected and odious, while its tools and dupes usurp and implores the confidence of the people to surrender their interest. The great rule of conduct for us in regard to foreign nations is, in extending our commercial relations, to have with them as little political connection as possible. So far as we are already formed engagements, let them be fulfilled with perfect good faith. Here let us stop. Observe good faith and justice towards all nations. Cultivate peace and harmony with all. Europe has set a primary interest which to us have none, or a very remote relation. Hence she must be engaged in frequent controversies, and causes of which are essentially foreign to our concerns. Hence, therefore, it must be unwise in us to implicate ourselves by artificial ties in the ordinary vicissitudes of her politics, or the ordinary combinations and collusions of her friendships or enmities. Our detachment and distant situation enables us to pursue a different course. If we remain one people under an efficient government, the period is not far off when we may define material injury from external annoyance, when we may take such attitude as will cause the neutrality we may at any time resolve upon to be scrupulously respected, when belligerent nations, under the impossibility of making accusations upon us, will not lightly hazard by the giving us provocation, when we may choose peace or war as our interests guided by justice shall console. Why forego the advantage of so peculiar a situation? Why quit to our own to stand upon foreign ground? Why, by intervening our destiny, which that of any part of Europe, entangle our peace and prosperity with the tools of European ambition, rivalship and interest, humour or caprice. It is our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world, so far I mean, as we are now at liberty to do it. For let me not be understood capable of patronising infidelity to existing engagements. I hold the maximum of no less applicable to public than to private affairs, that honesty is always the best policy. I repeat, therefore, let those engagements be observed in their genuine sense, but in my opinion it is unnecessary and would be unwise to extend them. Europe has a set of primary interests which to us have none or very remote relation, taking care always to keep ourselves by suitable establishments on the respectable defensive posture, we may safely trust to temporary alliances for extraordinary emergencies, though in reviewing the incidents to my administration I am unconscious of intentional error. I am nevertheless too sensible for my defects not to think it probable that I may have committed many errors. Whatever they may be, I frequently beseech the Almighty to avert or mitigate the evils to which they may tend. I shall also carry with me the hope that my country will never cease to view them with indulgence, and that after 45 years of my life dedicated to its service with the upright zeal and faults of incompetent abilities, will be consigned to oblivion, as myself must soon be to the mansions of rest, relying on its own kindness in this as in other things, the accoutred by the fervent love towards it which is so natural to a man who views it in the native soil himself and his progenitors for several generations. I anticipate with pleasing exception that retreat in which I promise myself to realise without alloy the sweet enjoyment of partaking in the midst of my fellow citizens the benign influence of good laws under a free government, the ever favourite object of my heart and happy reward. I trust to our mutual cares, labours and dangers. Next time, Thomas Jefferson.